John, do you mind if I record your presentation?
Oh, that's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, let's sail down the Snow Chi Minh Trail, shall we? One of the interesting scenes you might see there. So what is the 77-mile Snow Chi Minh Trail? I've got the map here showing Laramie here and Rawlins over here. And as you can see, this is US 30. And as you know, I-80 essentially replaced US 30. And of course, US 30 essentially replaced the Lincoln Highway. So the Lincoln Highway and US 30, historically, the roads leave Laramie to the north and go through Bosler and Rock River and Medicine Bow and Hannah, and then to Wolcott Junction and on to Rawlins. So when I-80 was being planned, the assumption was I-80 would just go from Cheyenne to Laramie, and then it would just follow existing US 30 on to Rawlins. But the federal government had a different idea. They had an idea that would save 19 miles by cutting straight across to Wolcott Junction. And so this particular map I have, it shows I-80 checkered, which means it's under construction. So this is a late 1960s map, and it shows I-80 under construction. So basically, this piece of road, it's a unique piece of interstate in that it didn't follow the existing highway. And it's also so far from US 30 that when I-80 was being constructed, you couldn't see the new project from the existing highway. So it remained a mystery in that regard. Beyond that, from the time the federal government proposed the road location in 1956 to the time the road opened in 1970, a lot of years passed. So more than 14 years passed from the time they discussed the road to the time it opened. So the rest of I-80 was open with one exception, a short exception, but most of I-80 was already open, but there was this 77-mile chunk that remained a mystery. And of course, when the road did open, snow and bad roads became the new story. But just a real quick walk down history lane. The location for I-80 was actually not an all new location. More or less I-80 between Laramie, which is down here in the corner, and here's Elk Mountain, and then here's Rawlins and Wolcott Junction. So this road actually existed. It was the Overland Trail. So basically, when you're driving from Laramie towards Rawlins, you're on the Overland Trail. Well, when the Lincoln Highway was established in 1913, the Lincoln Highway Association actually declared this shorter stretch through Elk Mountain as the location for the Lincoln Highway. One of the problems was not very many people were using it. Most people were actually using this road that follows, the Union Pacific Railroad. So this official Lincoln Highway, it didn't last for very long through Elk Mountain. The Lincoln Highway Association then approved this route through Rock River and Medicine Bow and Hannah. So what is the debate? Well, that shorter route is 19 miles shorter. And if you ask a motorist if you would like to save 19 miles, most of them will say yes. And basically that's what the federal government was working on. Origin and destination studies were done in the 1950s. They asked motorists, if you had the choice to just cut straight through between Laramie and Rawlins, or if you wanted to go through Rock River or Bosler, what would you choose? Almost 90% of motorists said they would rather just cut straight through and save 19 miles. They had no interest in Bosler, Rock River, Medicine Bow, or Hannah. So the feds kind of planned this route around the fact that most people wanted a shorter road. Of course, the trade-off is winter conditions that were known to exist in the Arlington-Elk Mountain area. And of course, these communities like Rock River and Medicine Bow are going to lose all that interstate traffic. So those were the two big dilemmas that were dealt with. So as I mentioned, in 1956, the feds proposed a location, and the highway department said, no, we want to build I-80 right on the existing US 30. So the feds and the state really start to battle out for route location. And they basically have to come up with an agreement. The feds and the state highway department have to come up with an agreement, and then that's accepted. Well, between 1956 and 1959, while the rest of the interstate system is being built, Wyoming and the feds battle over the route location. It actually got so bad that in 1959, in June of 59, there was a US Senate hearing. So Wyoming's Senate delegation, which included Joseph Omani and Gel McGee, who is pictured here, battled the Federal Bureau of Public Roads right on the floor of the Senate, and basically Wyoming lost. The feds said, look, most people want a shorter road, and so that's what we're going to do. So the state of Wyoming realized by the summer of 1959 that the feds weren't going to budge, and that's where the road was going to be. So you'll see the road was officially approved in 1959, but construction actually does not start until 1966. So 7 years go by before the first earth movers show up. The reason was the highway department, the highway commission specifically, wanted to protect those US 30 communities between Laramie and Rawlins. So they chose to delay construction as long as they could. Finally, in 1966, the Fed said, you need to get cracking on that chunk of interstate if you want our money. So the state delayed it for as long as it could. By the time construction did start in 1966, I-80 was already opened from Wolcott Junction west toward Rawlins, and it was already open east from Laramie to Cheyenne. And then construction did take 4 years. And I mentioned beyond 4 years. When the road opened in October of 1970, it actually wasn't completed yet. They still had quite a bit of work to do, but they went ahead and opened it anyway. So the road officially was dedicated, and it was such an exciting moment. They actually really did have a ceremony. They had a ribbon cutting, and they had it out at Arlington. They thought it would be nice to have it right in the middle of Arlington. So Arlington is right in between Rawlins and Laramie. It's about the halfway point. So they decided to have a ribbon cutting ceremony at Arlington. And they did it on a Saturday morning. And Governor Hathaway, who was seen here at the podium, gave some remarks, and then they cut the ribbon. Some of you might remember Ross Stapp. He was the superintendent of the Highway Department in 1970. Linda Sue Plambeck here in the crutches was a 1970 Carpenter High School graduate, and she was in Girls State, and so she was asked to participate. And of course, this is Governor Stan Hathaway. And over here is the Highway Commissioner, Gus Fleischley. Some of you might know Gus from Cheyenne. So the ribbon cutting occurred at 10 in the morning on that Saturday. And then at 1 o'clock was a big football game in Laramie. The University of Wyoming Cowboys played Arizona State that afternoon. So they thought that would be a good day for a ribbon cutting. Well, guess what? 4 days later, that's all it took for I-80 to close. Of course, the locals said, we tried to tell you, you being the feds, but they didn't listen. So I-80 literally was only open for 4 days before it closed again, or before it closed for the first time. So what were those early years like on the Snow Chi Minh Trail? Well, there were no snow fences. So there was a lot of low visibility conditions and also major drifting. Conventional snow plows couldn't keep up with the snow without snow fences. So they actually had to call in rotary plows like this early model seen here. Sometimes the rotary plows couldn't keep up, so they had to pull in the bulldozers. And sometimes they needed front end loaders. So it was a real mess out there those first winters. There were no road closure gates, so there was no good way to keep people off the road. So even though the highway department knew the road was horrible, there wasn't a real good way to keep people off it initially. And it was so bad that it actually makes national news. Some of you might remember Charles Kuralt. He is seen here. He had a CBS program called On the Road. And on the February 29th, 1972 On the Road segment, Charles Kuralt featured the Snow Chi Minh Trail, and he called it the worst stretch of highway in America and told people not to drive on it. So it was a very infamous road by now. So of course, we know what the problem is out there, wind. And of course, more wind. If you've been in Wyoming since the late 70s, early 80s, you actually might remember these wind turbines put up by the Bureau of Reclamation as part of a wind study. It was known that the wind in the area north of Arlington, between Arlington and Medicine Bow, was significant. So the feds actually did one of their first big wind turbine studies out there. And there's two turbines, the big one here in the background, you can see another one off in the distance there. So they had two turbines out there, and both of them actually were damaged by wind over time. So the project, these turbines lasted about 10 years. So we've got the wind, and then we mix in a little bit of snow, and we've got the Snow Chi Minh Trail. Of course, when the road opened in 1970, the Vietnam War was occurring, and Americans were used to hearing the term Ho Chi Minh Trail. And so that's kind of where the infamous name Snow Chi Minh Trail comes from. It comes from a much, even a more infamous name, Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I would just propose that it's perhaps a scenario like this where the term Snow Chi Minh Trail got its origin. So this is a picture of the Rawlins Daily Times, October 12, 1970 edition. So I-80 had already been closed several times. And I did check the weather the day this paper came out. The weather in Rawlins was lousy. And so I can imagine that with a headline like Ho Chi Minh Trail and I-80 being brand new and being closed, someone probably saw the connection there and just modified it a little bit. So I'm guessing it was probably a scenario like this, where we have the origin Snow Chi Minh Trail. There's documented evidence of the term Snow Chi Minh Trail by the time that first winter is over. So by 1971, you're seeing the term used. So when the highway opened in 1970, basically the war was waged, and it was really up to WYDOT to figure out how to keep the road open and safe. And because of this piece of road, this specific piece of road, WYDOT really placed itself at the forefront of wintertime road maintenance. WYDOT became kind of the model highway department for wintertime road maintenance. They became pioneers. They designed an all-new snow fence. Without these snow fences, I-80 would be closed a good chunk of the winter. Prior to all these fences getting put in, the Wyoming legislature at the 1973 legislative session, there actually was a bill introduced to close I-80 in the winter. So in October, they would close I-80 between Laramie and Wolcott Junction, and motorists would use US 30. So that's how bad it was. The research was very scientific. You actually see a little scale model here. So these engineers just did scale model research to come up with a fence design that would maximize holding capacity. And of course, we know that the highway department didn't invent the snow fence, they just perfected it. But I would like to make a little nod to the Wyoming snow fence. When we think about Wyoming icons, we often think of like the bucking bronco logo, but I would propose a snow fence as being a pretty neat Wyoming icon. We have by far the world's greatest concentration of snow fences. And when the UP Railroad was being constructed across southern Wyoming in 1868, snow fences were part of, they realized during construction they weren't going to be able to keep the tracks open, especially in the Laramie area. So they actually had engineers construct snow fences with the very beginning. So when Wyoming became a territory in 1868, the fences came with it. So the fences have been here since day one. As I mentioned, there were no road closure gates when I-80 opened. So when they realized they had to keep people off this road during bad weather, the only way they initially had to do that was to literally stand out on the road and wave an orange flag. So you'll see a picture of a highway department truck and a couple of gentlemen standing here holding a road closed sign. So they would tell people to turn around and head back. Of course, it's a very dangerous job to do that and a waste of manpower. So by 1973, the highway department had come up with the idea of using road closure gates. It's the first use of road closure gates on a major highway. Certainly nothing like this had been seen on an interstate highway. So again, Wyoming is paving the way. We've got the use of the snow fence and now a road closure gate. In 1991, they perfected the gate and used more of a drop-down railroad style gate. And that's what we're now accustomed to. So those started to appear in 1991. This is a much safer gate than the swinging gate. And they also entered into the era of social media, if you want to think of it that way. Electricity shows up in 1976. And this is where Wyoming first implements a variable message sign. So they put up a variable message sign on either side of the Snow Chi Minh Trail. In Laramie, they installed the variable message sign at the Curtis Street exit. And then on the west side, they put up a variable message sign at Wolcott Junction. So these were the first use of variable message signs in the state. And also the Laramie-Wolcott stretch ushers in the variable speed limit. So this is the first place the state uses the variable speed limit. It got introduced in 2008 in a very limited way. And then by 2010, the variable speed limit program was expanded to basically its current configuration. And now we've seen the variable speed limit signs spread throughout the state. This probably is among the biggest advancement the state's made. Just if we can get traffic to slow down, you're still going to have crashes, but they might not involve fatalities. So that's where the variable speed limit really is important. So those were the major innovations that this piece of highway ushered in, and WYDOT led these efforts. So the I-80 problem in terms of routing, of course, the major one was I-80 between Laramie and Rawlins, but there was another small debate, I-80 debate, and it was right in your backyard in Cheyenne. In Cheyenne in 1966, they were debating where I-80 would pass through the Cheyenne area. And again, the feds had a different idea than the state and the citizens of Cheyenne. And that leads to a fourth and very little known interstate, I-180. I bet there's Cheyennites who don't even know that there's an I-180. So South Central, from Central Avenue over the viaducts to Lincoln Way, that's actually an interstate highway. So many of you probably drive on this road every day or perhaps weekly, and you're actually on an interstate. So how did that little thing come to be? Well, basically, old US 30. So here's Sun Valley right here where the arrow is. So this is the Sun Valley neighborhood. This is basically College Drive right here. And here's Nation Way. And here is Lincoln Way. So this is where Lincoln Way and Nation Way all kind of come together at College Drive on the east end of Cheyenne. Well, as you know, that's old US 30. The city of Cheyenne, the mayor at the time was Mayor Story. Some of you are familiar with the name Story in Cheyenne, Story Boulevard. Mayor Story and the Highway Commission actually supported what was known as the North Route. So I-80 was going to enter Cheyenne near the north of the Sun Valley neighborhood. And it was gonna have an interchange with Lincoln Way and Nation Way. And then the road would continue south and wrap around Frontier Refinery and then head west toward Laramie. Well, the feds proposed what was called a south route, and that's this blue line here. And of course, we know that that's the one that was selected. Cheyenne didn't like this south route because they thought all of that highway traffic was just going to zip past Cheyenne and never stop. And in 1960s thinking, if people were going to pass quite a distance from a community, from a downtown, 1960s thinking suggested that would spell doom for a downtown business district. So the goal was to keep traffic close, and that's why they thought having Lincoln Way and Nation Way connecting directly would bring that traffic right into town, and that would help protect the businesses. Again, the feds did not support that route, mostly because of the way it was gonna dissect through a developing area. So for safety reasons, they actually thought keeping it south would be better and traffic would flow more smoothly. So the arrangement, the compromise was that if they built this south like it is today, that the feds would include in the project a connector to get people directly downtown. So that is where I-180 comes in. So it's 1.4 miles, I believe, in length. So it's the 4th shortest interstate in the nation, and one of only a few that actually has stoplights on it. So that's Cheyenne's little I-80 debate. Because this piece of US 30, this existing piece of US 30 already was a divided road, there wasn't a great need to finish this project right away. So the highway department kind of delayed construction on this 9-mile piece of road. It's called the Cheyenne Archer stretch. So this 9-mile piece of road got delayed. It was actually the last piece of Interstate 80 to open in the state. It opened on May 4th, 1977. So when this piece of I-80 opened at the east end of Cheyenne, that was the completion of Interstate 80 across the state. It took quite a few more years for I-180 to be completed. And that's because they had to build the viaducts over the railroad. The first viaduct opened in 1982, and the second viaduct opened in 1984. But those viaducts over the railroad are a direct result of the I-80 location that ended up being placed at this south end. So that's a quick little tour of kind of I-80 between Cheyenne and Rawlins. And I will end there and